Welcome to Cybersecurity Today, the week in review. I'm Jim Love. This is the point where Howard reviews the top stories of the week, and so here's my review of the top stories of the week. CrowdStrike, the end. No, there was a little more than that, and we'll dig into some of that, but we're going to spend a lot of time, not surprisingly, talking about CrowdStrike this week. There are some other stories that were big and maybe didn't get a lot of attention last week. AT&T was back in the news. Not exactly a security story, but it is a story about resilience when technology fails. And that, unless I'm horribly wrong, is hugely important as part of cybersecurity. We have to protect our businesses from attacks, but equally important, we have to know that attacks and failures are going to happen, and our businesses have to be resilient enough to withstand that. So the FCC has declared that AT&T were responsible for an outage in February that blocked 92 million calls, including calls to emergency services and others. They were, according to reports, missing adequate testing and peer review. And after our dive into CrowdStrike, this might sound like a familiar trend, so I'll let that one go. There was a new strain of malware detected in the Ukraine, and that caught our attention. We did a story on that in Tech News Day this week. That attacked infrastructure, and it was actually found in January, but it hit the news this week. The malware targets Modbus, a protocol designed in the 1970s, and that powers communication systems and infrastructure in factories for the most part, but any sort of industrial system. Now, industrial control systems, the recommended protection is to keep your equipment from being on the internet. We'll talk about that in a minute. And finally, a company called Wiz, a security startup, turned down $23 billion from Google to follow up on their own yellow brick road. And then there's CrowdStrike. They published their preliminary PIR, post-incident report. God, we love acronyms in this business. Post-incident report review yesterday, and CEO George Kurtz has been summoned to talk to the Homeland Security Committee of the U.S. Congress. I'm sure he's looking forward to that meeting. He's probably watching old I Love Lucy reruns so he can hear him say, "Got some splaining to do." And it is tough. If anybody's been watching the news and you saw what one committee did to the head of the Secret Service this week, I'd be a little jittery. But Kurtz has promised complete transparency on this incident. So that's our news. And I'm going to bring in our panel, and we're going to discuss some of these stories. With us is Terry Cutler, head of Cyology Labs in Montreal. Terry, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
David Shipley, head of Beauceron Security in beautiful downtown Fredericton, New Brunswick.
Great to be here.
And our new guest, no, I was just kidding, Mike. Our new guest is Mike Walters, president and co-founder of Action One. And Mike is new. I brought him in because his firm deals with something that I think is going to be very relevant to the stories we're talking about today, and that is how you do effective patching. Welcome, Mike.
Jim, happy to be here.
Now, everybody knows Terry and David and what they do. Talk about what your company does before we get started.
We are a post management company. This is all we do. So we're cloud-based, agent-based at the same time, solution for matching your infrastructure. So we deal with laptops, servers, everything. Pretty much what we do.
Cool. So quickly through the news so we can get to the big story of the week. David, you made the comment on I could keep calling it the Wiz, on the Wiz Purchase. You asked a really great question on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, Wiz has been one of those Gil-Renan startups that has just been on a tear, recently raising $1 billion in capital, currently has a revenue run rate in the $400 million range, looking now become a $1 billion a year revenue company. Now, when you've got $400 million in revenue and someone comes knocking on your door for $23 billion, that's a really good multiple on where you're at, and kind of surprising to see them walk. And I've seen a lot of chatter on LinkedIn where people are going, this is the Zuckerberg Yahoo moment where someone knows their true value, et cetera. And I'm like, well, I don't think so. I think this is banana pan. I think someone just walked away with a lot of money if that was the case. Now, other friends who have been through multiple security startups have pointed out that this is also a brilliant marketing move if you're about to go for an IPO, because now you've kind of got a sense for market value. Well, Google was going to buy us for $23 billion. So, seeing where they go for this, but I don't see this story ending well, because I don't think the valuation makes sense. I think the multiples on some of these companies are just insane.
I did an update to your LinkedIn post. I did some quick math. They said 25% profit margin. Does anybody make 25% after taxes? I'd love to. So if you got that, then it's going to take you 100 years to pay off this investment. And
Yeah,
that's just to pay it off.
I think, a great day for them would be 10, maybe 10x their revenue. So
Yeah.
4 billion, 5 billion, that seems like a pretty good, reasonable deal. I say
You can
reasonable.
hear the voice of Ted DiBiase from wrestling. Everybody's got a price for the $1 million man. There's a price out there for sure.
But I just
Oh,
want to say to
yeah.
Google, if you're feeling burned and you want to make a great acquisition, I've got a far better deal for you.
People prior to that, people were talking about consolidation, reduce the number of tools, go from 100 vendors to 50 vendors, but then CrowdStrike happened. Oh no, it's a vendor monoculture. So we have to get rid of that. So okay, and now Wiz comes into the scene because they are multi-cloud. They bring multiple types of vendors together and manage from a single console. So you don't have the monoculture. But so maybe just my guess is like, oh, well, we are in business and we're more valuable. And they actually named it as something like there's been speculation. Oh, maybe the CrowdStrike incident was the reason, like big reason why they could decide to kind of back off. Oh no, we can get a better deal. Even 23 billion is not enough.
What is that Gordon Gekko quote? For lack of a better word, greed is good. I guess we're going to put the Gordon Gekko thesis to the test. I heard something interesting about this expression that is so overused in IT and security. It's the single pane of glass. And what we just saw is the single pane of risk.
Wait a minute. I'm going to edit that out so I can steal that line. Geez, that's good. Single pane of risk. That's right up there with my people who live behind a single pane of glass shouldn't throw stones. Yeah. Okay, so next story here, the Modbus story. Now, I know this is so unfamiliar to us, a little tech debt here. This protocol has been around that serves the Modbus services, which are really industrial control systems. They found some problems in the Ukraine, or at least they found a malware that was infecting this industrial control system protocol. It's been around since the 1970s. The fix for it was keep your industrial control systems off the internet. Terry, you're our ethical hacker here. You have any problem getting to a system that's an industrial control system that's off the internet?
So we do a lot of penetration testing, as you know, and we actually come across ICS devices all the time. So the way we see this is that back in the 70s, these devices were never meant to be connected to a network. You had to manually go one by one to get the results of what you wanted, either from the sensors or the thermal pumps, whatever you're scanning. But now they thought, oh, it'd be a really cool idea if we can centralize all this stuff. Instead of going to all these locations, we could do everything in one shot. And now that everything's connected onto the network, or worse, the internet, these things were never meant to be protected because you cannot install agents on these things to protect them, right? There's not enough memory on these devices. So the only way to properly protect these things is to segment it off. And not only that, you need to have proper detection technology in place in your business to know there's a hacker in there. So let me dump on a couple of vendors here. I'm mentioning vendors, but they're log-based.
Not mentioning any names.
You know who you are. You guys are log-based management systems, and you're not picking up the proper signals that there's a breach happening in your system. I'll give you a perfect example. We did a pen test. All they saw in their results was Kali Linux got updated. They didn't see our 22,000 attacks that went out in the system. But you need to have a detection system that has like full packet capture capabilities that can look at what's going on in the network. Something that can actually tell you, hey, there's a vulnerability scan happening right now. Do you know about it? Or, because these ICS devices can't have agents on them, at least the network sensor will pick up any weird attacks happening to those devices. And maybe you can have a built-in DNS firewall to help protect the agents from being attacked from those compromised ICS devices.
And I just want to add into Terry's point. So I was responsible for protecting a university. That university had a heat, steam, natural gas plant. Our particular university was on a hill. And one day, through a series of miscommunications, the natural gas heating plant was put on the internet by accident. Because when IT was asked to dual interface a environmental reporting tool, so someone didn't have to walk the hill in the dead of winter to go download the extract for reporting, but remote into that, when they said, I want to be on the campus network, they meant, well, we want only accessible from this building to this building. But campus network was actually a label at the time for internet access. And so they put this heating plant on the internet. And let me tell you, bad times happened shortly thereafter. And the other part about this entire story is you've got this 1970s communication protocol never designed to be doing what it's doing. You've usually got 5 or 6 vendors stuff stacked and mixed together because a lot of the stuff is environments where lowest bidder, whether it's private sector or public sector. And let me tell you, when you get into cleaning up one of these incidents and the amount of vendor finger pointing and the amount of we've never had to do that before is uncomfortable. The last thing about the story, this was dead of winter in Ukraine. It was 600 buildings, right? And this is an example how Russia has turned Ukraine into a living hell lab for cyber warfare. And we're a country that can't even keep its pipelines off of the internet. And we expect to do better if things get hot.
Maybe I can share a fast story too, a little myth. So we did a pen test on an energy company, and they had a bunch of ICS devices on a segmented private network that only one server could see. But that server was also connected to the main network as well. But it was a private network for the ICS guys. We were able to compromise the server and then pivot onto the private network. And when they saw that we're able to get access to devices with admin credentials, by the way, they didn't change their default password. And we're able to see the controls and show them how we could have manipulated some of the stats, the numbers. They lost their freaking mind. They were really upset about it.
You know, the number of apartment buildings in this country that use a very small number of vendors, remote tools to manage the heating and lighting and ventilation systems. I remember doing a scan on this. It'd be 6 years ago now and more than that. And I was like, oh, look at this condo in Vancouver. And admin, how much fun could I have if I was unethical? Like, it was crazy.
I did a show, and I think we're going to replay it. An ethical hacker, and he did a walk around with the city of Toronto with me, including how he would get into condos. It's scary. My favorite on this, and I'll just close off on this, and we'll move on to the CrowdStrike thing because that's sure everybody wants to talk about, I'm sure. But I was sitting there watching this guy who's telling me that our industrial control systems are all off the internet. And I said, so how do you get in to service them? And he points at this laptop. And I went, but you never put that laptop on the internet. Oh, yeah. Did you ever put those two things together? I can hack this. And if I can hack it, believe me, it's something. We'll come back to this story, maybe bring this panel back again, because I think this is an important piece. Not just that it's industrial control systems, but our technical debt is a huge piece. But I want to move on. So CrowdStrike, not the first time an endpoint security company's failed and taken machines down with it. I think we saw the preliminary incident report. I guess everybody's seen that. We found out it's a template, not a driver. Oh, gosh, it lives in a folder called System 32 Drivers, and it talks to the kernel. So I think this walk like a duck, talk like a duck. It was a data issue. I think people got that right. And I think the big question we had was, did they have any testing? And I think the answer to the fact that they did have testing, there were some points of failure in there. And I think we'll all have some opinions on that. So this isn't the first time, guys, that a security company's failed. Does anybody remember any other ones? I remember one in
I think it's the first time we see a cybersecurity firm cause more damage than a virus itself. Unfortunately.
Well, and I got to pour one out for the CEO because he was the CTO of McAfee when they had one of these events and it wiped out half of their market value. So I was thinking, like, I don't know, the term post-traumatic stress gets thrown about a lot, but I'm really thinking there's an IT equivalent that this guy is going to need some serious counseling and help after this, because I would be like selling everything and living in a cabin at that point, considering myself cursed. Because like once in a lifetime, that he recovered from that was outstanding. But to have it twice in a lifetime, I would become a monk.
Look, to be fair, this can happen to anyone, right? We don't want to dump on CrowdStrike because in the end, it's software. There's human error behind the scenes. You know, there's rumors that, yes, they obviously do have proper testing processes in place, but I guess maybe this one slipped in after maybe the QA phase. We don't know yet. And with some blame saying the European laws force them to use a kernel access. And you need to have kernel access to stop some of these advanced threats.
So yeah, I just want to clarify there that was empathy for George. That was not blame on George.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think
I genuinely feel bad. This can happen to anybody, but to have it happen to you twice is going to be a special place in hell. But the point about you mentioned about kernel access. So it was Microsoft that started pumping this story out Monday. And I thought, interesting. because the EU regulation was like, you can't give yourself privileged level of access and then differentiate your security offerings using that as a differentiator and not offer it to other third-party vendors. And so it's one thing. And then to have Microsoft this week, I also have a BitLocker BSOD bad patch. It's like, hey, glass houses, man. Like, just everyone slow your roll.
Yeah. I think we have to put this in perspective with everybody because the listeners may not be following it as exactly the way we are. So we had this thing that happened. It was a template, but it responded like a driver. It passed some bad data and it's put everything into blue screen of death. I think everybody knows that piece of it. There was a bit of a blame game going on. Well, the start of it, first of all, everybody presumed it was Microsoft, I think, or at least that was possible. And then CrowdStrike had to step up and say, no, it was me. But it was, and even in their post-incident report, they said, well, if Microsoft software had handled this elegantly, we wouldn't have had the problem. So there's the CrowdStrike against Microsoft. And then Microsoft goes back to a 2009 agreement with the European Union. Says, well, you see, we have to give access to our drivers, and that's why we're making this vulnerable. So the blame game, I think, is let's toss that because these guys can fight that out themselves. But the question is, and I'll ask this for you three guys, there was a point of failure in this. They tested this, but they put all of their faith in one routine that was going to check for data. 2 templates went through their testing routine that same day accurately and did well. And then this third one had bad data in it, but it was not picked up by this routine that was supposed to pick up bad data. Mike, I'm going to go to you. You're in the patching game. Is that the type of testing that we have in patching? Is that what we need?
My view on this is the root cause of the issue is not the testing. What the good testing is if you read that post-incident review, PIR. So it does say they went through rigorous testing, so they actually did it multiple times, but then something went wrong. So there's always something that could go wrong. Certain situations you cannot predict, right? And especially with such low-level kernel-level components that cause a blue screen of death. But I think the biggest issue here is the lack of phased rollout, because the normal practice in patching is when you create your, what they call this update rings. So they go ring 1, ring 2, ring 3. You can have as many as you want. Like the bigger the enterprise, the larger, the more update rings you're supposed to have. So ring 1 is when you do, okay, it's a bunch of test systems. So let's deploy it and see if they blow up, smoke chance. Then you expand to a bigger number of systems. And then, but my real question to CrowdStrike would be like, okay, why did it all happen? Sudden rapid rollout worldwide on Thursday night. Why not stage the approach? Okay, let's take 5% of our worldwide deployments and then do 5% more, and then continuously monitor. And if you look at that report, so what they say is, one of the conclusions, one of the areas of improvement for us is what they call refined deployment strategy. And it says, we're going to adapt a staggered deployment strategy, starting with a small subset of systems to further stage rollout. And then we're going to monitor those along the way. So we deploy this first patch, see what happens. Are they still operating? Okay, cool. Proceed to the next 5 or 10%. And then they also say, okay, we're going to give our customers a greater control. I'll go back to the customer control later on, actually, because I do have some thoughts on that. But these two things, it means, the question is, so you guys did not have it. So you operate with 8 million devices have failed, right? There's probably more. So there are probably tens of millions.
Maybe
of
I can add more to that for you. Maybe I can add a bit
sure.
more. So we've been a CrowdStrike partner since 2019. The way their agents work is they're auto updating all the time. So CrowdStrike is always updating their template on how to find the bad guys that might be attacking your system and lurking. And that, from what I understand, that part failed. That they did an update to how they find bad guys in the system, and obviously the code was wrong. But Microsoft reads the code, say, "Hey, you're going to crash my whole system. You're going to corrupt me." So it purposely blue screens of death to protect the data and protect the system integrity. So it does it on purpose to protect the system. That's why all these systems went down. They all went down because all the agents auto updated themselves instead of manually updated.
And just to add into that, this has been the whole narrative of the cat and mouse threat environment we now live in terms of the sense of urgency for it. Let's make a distinction that This was a content update versus a patch. And that might be splitting hairs, but I'm gonna make that distinction that the actual agent itself wasn't getting patched, that this was a toolbook, a dictionary, a guide that the agent is supposed to read to know what bad looked like. And the actual content was corrupted, and that caused this cascading failure. But I want to build onto something bigger now, because I think there's a couple of bigger macro issues beyond just the technology. Because, as you said at the start, Jim, this has happened before. And what's that old Battlestar Galactica remake saying? This has all happened before. This will all happen again. It will happen again. But what's interesting is the size and scale of this. So I was doing some research. We know it's 8.5 million devices that got taken down. The largest impact that we saw prior to this was WannaCry, which was about 300,000 devices went down to WannaCry. If you go back to MS Blast and to Slammer, which is really reaching back 20 years, you're talking about still devices in that 6-figure range. This is an order of magnitude larger. And so when we come out and say, and I think Troy Hunt was one of the first, but I was definitely in a lot of media reviews in Canada saying the same thing. This was the largest IT disruption ever. And it was 1% of the install base of Windows. And so in this case, let's again assume for the sake of argument, this was CrowdStrike's bad, not a Microsoft, again, whatever. But if Microsoft screws up, if they ever screw up, and we've got this issue with BitLocker that's there, and really epically go, or if Microsoft gets pwned really badly, we've got a huge systemic problem. And the last thing I'll add very, very quickly on this, I've taken to calling myself the Dr. Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park of this entire story, because I feel like the guy pointing John Hammond to say, your arrogance and hubris, John, is thinking that you can control these incredibly complex systems. And you can't. The illusion of control. These ring processes are going to be fantastic. They're going to help. But unless we think about a bigger point about monocultures, about resilience, about the battle between efficiency and resiliency, because that's now going to be the issue when it comes to security, we are going to experience this again. And I just want to focus on one thing. A lot of people focused on the people pissed off at airports, and it was great for media, right? Because you can roll the camera, public space, people are mad. 60,000 devices in the British Columbia Health Authority down. And we know from American cases that when the IT systems fail, patient care decreases to the point where potentially life-impacting mistakes are made. This outage potentially put lives in danger.
David's our media critic. He's got all the film and TV references for us in here. But what was it with the airport thing? Like, I get it, but it was like every time I looked around to try and find the impact, everybody's talking about airports. I get it. Bad stuff. But talk about missing the real news on this. I'll just leave that with you.
Well, I used to be a reporter. So you go to where the drama is going to be. And like, this perfect drama. You've got the busiest travel weekend of the year, according to US Airlines, and absolute payoff. This is perfect. It's visual, it's TV. How do you visualize the fact that tens of millions of people didn't get paid on Friday and that most people live paycheck to paycheck? So this stuff matters. How do you visualize that, and talk about how this is affecting patient care and may have actually killed somebody? You can't prove that yet. That's going to be months, if not years. We gravitate towards the visual, but we forget just how frightening this was.
If I have a question for Mike, so when these disruptions are happening with CrowdStrike and such like this, you obviously brought in to help rebuild the environment, help them repatch their environment, right? Who takes care of the bill? Because the insurance company is probably not going to pay. The company shouldn't feel like they have to pay. It's someone else's software. So who pays for the bill?
The shrink wrap agreement that says that you're only entitled for the amount of money you paid to CrowdStrike. Well, which now everybody's pushing and asking that same question. It's like, are we going to pay for the outage? We've yet to see the real cost of the outage, but yeah, like David said, it is they pick the most stories that they call these storytelling and marketing and in journalism as well. You pick some emotionally concerning stories like, okay, somebody had their heart surgery canceled that morning because of the outage, or somebody was late for their most important flight. They had a wedding or whatever. They canceled it. I was actually personally affected. That was my teenage daughter. It was her first flight alone. She was coming back from Paris on that very morning. So like, and so the friend of mine texted me, "Oh, the flights are getting canceled." Like I'm monitoring that person. It was like 2 o'clock at night. Like, I was checking the flights. Like, oh, 5 hour delay, Paris to LAX. Okay, cool.
Yep.
It's happening to me personally. It is, but it just shows the amount of impact we have when we rely on pretty much one single system that is so widespread that any fail on that. And going back to Dave's question or like concern, but okay, it's all Microsoft. What if they screw up? What if it's not 1% of Windows system? What if it's 99% of Windows systems that fail and what the whole world stops at that point?
Yeah. I want to
right?
jump in again and give a shout out because we're at this point in the conversation to the CrowdStrike staff. I think everybody's talking about what people did wrong. Somebody, and I don't know what time this was, but someone in under an hour saw something was happening, jumped on it, stopped it. So it only, only 8.5 million machines. But if somebody hadn't been on the ball, and I'm betting that there's no time for a whole phone tree to go up to the boss and come back down, somebody there made the right call, said, stop this now, pull that file, and by the way, put it on our blocked list so that some machines can recover. Somebody sitting in a room did that, and I think we should applaud them. But there's got to be a better way to do that, Mike. And we were starting that. We talked about the canary method of being able to go out and do it, or circles of updates. How should we be tackling this type of issue in the future?
The simplest answer is just do a phased rollout. It's simple as that. I can speak to how we do this. We have kind of the same situation. We're not at the scale of CrowdStrike, so we're slightly past 1 million endpoints under management, and we have an agent. We have an agent that we release. I should say probably every month, or sometimes more frequently. And the approach we take, we have different regions. We have cloud instances. We have Europe, North America, Australia. So they're isolated. So we separate deployments. So we do Europe first, and we actually randomly pick it each time. And then within each instance, we do a 5-day rollout. So we do 20%, and we never do this on Fridays, by the way. So it was like a decision a few years ago. Don't do nothing on Friday, right? So we start on Monday. So the first batch, 20% batch, goes on Monday randomly gets picked, deployed. We check the status. We constantly monitor. Okay, do we still see those endpoints online? Are the agents still reporting back? Okay, all goes well. Tuesday comes, the next 20%, and then by Friday, we basically the last batch does go on Friday, but that's the last 20%. The likelihood of anything happening to that 20% is minimal. And I think when we had situations like, okay, no, something that like the agents are starting, we can't crash the system, so we do not operate in kernel mode like CrowdStrike did. But worst thing that happens is our customer systems are no longer being passed, right? So the agent fails and no longer operates. But the phased rollout at least guarantees that the problem would not be as mass scale as what happened at CrowdStrike. And what's also I started talking about this. It's one of the strategy changes that CrowdStrike is considering now. It's item number 3 in the executive report, where it says refine deployment strategy, is provide customers with greater control over the delivery of rapid response content. And that's a kind of, I think it's kind of a slippery slope, because what's happening now is people have lost trust in automatic updates. So our customers, so on that day, on Friday, we had numerous requests in our tech support teams asking, okay, how do you guys update your agents? Can we stop it for a while? Can we stabilize in one version for a week or two? We're like, well, we don't. We also automatically update. We educated them on our phased rollout approach. So it's like, okay, no, don't worry, we don't do rapid deployment everywhere at the same time. But they still questioned it. They said, and I think so. Giving your customers more control over the update process means they're probably going to delay it. And the industry, cybersecurity industry in general, is fighting against this problem, because we have this mean time to remediate, which 2022, it was 60 days. 2023, it went up to 65 days. And this is in the age of AI-enabled threat actors who generate exploits in microseconds, like millions of versions of exploits.
When I do my
We're talking
audits,
about decreasing that.
I'm still running into MS17010, which is the SMBv1 bug. I still come across this when we do the audits. These updates are years old now. And one of the ways that ransomware gets in the environment, it's one of the ways I compromise the entire environment, pass the hash across the entire network, compromise the whole place because of that one patch. These customers don't have the knowledge. They don't have this. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the resources to really update themselves. And a lot of times when we do these audits, pretty much none of them have a testing deployment system in place before it goes into production. It goes straight to production. That's the other challenge I'm seeing.
Well, I want to go back is all the things that Mike, you've said, it all makes sense in their technology company best practices, like in terms of the stage rollouts, the canaries. Terry, you've just pointed out the customer best practices is to have a test environment, yet they're not. I do think cyber criminals are the big winners of this because everyone's going to be forced to slow down. You will not convince a large enterprise CEO right now that the risk of cyber threat is greater than the risk of what they're watching Delta Airlines CEO go through. But the other thing I want to just quickly add to this is something that I saw, I think it was Katie Massaris, but it might be someone else, but they talked about the important need for digital census. And I really do think government has a role to play in understanding the market dynamics within their nation and globally in terms of how much cross and systemic dependence actually exists. You can't create good policy and good regulation if you don't actually even know what the environment looks like. No one knew who CrowdStrike was, except for us nerds, until Friday, right? Certainly not the majority, but you can't start mapping the complexities of a potential cascading failure till you actually know what it looks like. And maybe that means that in regulated sectors like banking, hey, every bank can't use the same MDR inline security tool because that seems like a bad idea.
Thank you. I want to jump in there and just to focus this question. But this is the thing. I spent a great deal of my career in testing. And what we would do, not that we were magic, not that we never made mistakes, because we did, but we would do risk assessments to say, where are the risks? What risks could these programs have? Where are the single points of failure? And this was the killer with me, is everybody did this, and it just drives me nuts in this industry. They had system testing, they had unit testing, they had a promotion, and no one asked themselves, there's only one place you catch bad data? I'm sorry. You're writing to a driver. Did nobody sit and think this? And I'm not dumping on these guys. I think one of you said it, it was cultural. We think that we tick the boxes. Ergo, we have a testing method. Ergo, we have an inspection method. You're on this all the time, Terry. I'll let you talk first on this. But, people, they've got logs. Well, we got the logs, Terry. Ever look at them? Do you guys feel the same way I do?
So building on what David said, right now we're dealing with a situation where the CEO of these companies right now that are affected are saying, this could never happen again. I don't want you dealing with one vendor. I want you to deal with multiple. So and I work in healthcare that have multiple vendors working at the same time. So you got maybe Trend Micro on the servers, you got Microsoft Defender on the workstations, you've got something else for network. And when an incident occurs, 25 people are jumping onto a Zoom call and nobody knows what the hell's going on. They're trying to piecemeal everything together. The logs are not sufficient. These tools were never meant to work together. So you need to simplify your cybersecurity. And, yes, we want to consolidate these tools, but unfortunately, human error happens. And yes, it brings the whole house down. We got to make sure it doesn't happen again. So bottom line, everybody's business disaster recovery playbooks were tested. And we'll have to see how that turns out.
Well, and I just want to highlight something here. This isn't over. Like the media cycle moved on Sunday night because President Biden said, peace out. And now it's all America all the time again. Like, hey, the nerds screwed up Friday afternoon and we had Saturday, and by Sunday, it was back to the other world-ending potential things that are happening. But it will happen again. And it's interesting, Terry, like one of the things that I do think monocultures are bad. When you look at nature, when you look at the way that we tried to do some forestry bad practices in Canada, where we planted just the most productive trees, and then a new invasive species or disease came and wiped it all out, and it was bad news bears. This is predictable, patternable, and testable. So, for my company, for example, I've said, hey, 30% of our device fleet should be Mac. And we should be able to know that if Windows had a bad day, we could keep the lights on. No, we wouldn't be fine, but we would be resilient on that side. I get your point about
Right.
multiple security tool conflict. And so maybe multiple EDRs in some ways is not an ideal strategy. But if we go back to the monoculture part of this, I think the Microsoft part, yeah, I've heard horror stories of organizations that were all Windows, including their server environment, possibly because of the industry they were in, legacy software, et cetera. But they were bricked. The entire business was a critical infrastructure business, and it was bricked. They were running to Best Buy to get new laptops, to rebuild an image, to then get into their server room. Remember that story of Facebook having to get like a saw to cut into their security controls, get into their network after they screwed DNS up? Like that, 10 times worse. We're talking weeks here. 8.5 million devices have to get touched and fixed. And if we don't fix the monoculture aspect of this, it's going to happen again. Because if I'm Russia, China, Iran, any bad actor, and I'm smart and I'm patient, we've already known they've compromised Microsoft before. And that's not a slag on Microsoft. Like if you're the big kid, everyone's coming after you. But if we don't think about resilience, we are the plot line of Battlestar Galactica episode 1, right? Like this could not be any clearer to me.
As of yesterday, speaking about those brick systems, so they optimized their update process. I think what was happening is system was splitting up, and it was not enough time to check for a new update before it crashed. But now what they did is they optimized the update system that it sends the update as quickly as possible, and they were able to recover. I think as of yesterday was 500,000 systems. But when previously bricks, and you no longer have to just physically be present in that. So it's good for them. They're actually trying to actively rectify the problem because they have such a huge problem at hand. It would not solve all of that, but they say Wi-Fi connected systems that are slower to connect to CrowdStrike instance to request updates. They still need attention, but at least they're doing something, which is great news.
And I
for
want to
everyone,
jump on
actually.
one observation a very smart friend of mine made, because I was thinking about how remote work has made this fix problem infinitely harder for a lot of organizations, because you got fleets of laptops out there, home networks, and you got to arrange for sites for people to bring their broken laptops in and get them fixed. But one of the points he made was a lot of organizations may have gotten really lucky because in a laptop oriented culture, people went to bed, their laptops were powered down. They were in their bags. They weren't up. They didn't get the update. And so this 8.5 million could have been orders of magnitude worse if we were still a desktop based culture. And I thought, wow.
Well, it's in the middle of the night. That's my conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so
And
there's
hit the
one
brakes
lesson we've learned,
Before 8
folks.
o'clock in the morning.
One lesson we've learned from this: sleep in. The early bird gets the worm,
Yeah.
but they also get the bad update. I want to wrap it up, so I'm going to go with each one of you. We'll start with Mike. Lessons learned are only lessons learned if we actually do something different. What did you take away from this that you're going to do different, your company or for your customers?
Further scrutinize based deployment rollout approach. Just try to find flaws in that and make sure there's no way we can break all of our customer systems. I think this is probably the most important lesson learned. And at the same time, evangelize actually updates are not bad. Like you have to deploy them as timely as possible. If something is critical and needs to be patched, don't delay because of the fears. Because the things happen, but working hard to prevent them, to preempt that situations like this.
And quick flip side, what should your customers be doing?
I think what the fear is, okay, updates are bad. So we've seen CrowdStrike happening, McAfee happening. But the most important thing is to just educate them. No, those were just rare occurrences, and the industry learned from those lessons learned for sure. So we just have to rebuild that confidence, and it'll take time.
Yeah. And Terry, what'd you take away from this? That
It ain't over yet. That's all. No, basically, look, this can happen to anybody, right? So we see a lot of vendors online that were bashing CrowdStrike. Oh yeah, if you set up a CrowdStrike, we got our solution, does the same thing. It could happen to them too. So quietly, while everybody was bashing CrowdStrike, they're internalizing, guys, let's get our stuff together here. This cannot happen to us either. Like, let's double check our testing process, make sure it doesn't screw up. I think everybody got a glance like, hey, you know what, this could happen to us, and let's get our house in order. I think that's what's happening right now.
So a couple of quick takes for me. Obviously, as a security awareness provider that has a report a phish button, we have a really unique position now in Canada where we see some interesting trend. And I got to tell you, on the marketing side for a lot of security companies, and people did not react well. FYI, marketer, ambulance chasing in real time in this disaster with here's lists of CrowdStrike customers you can poach. What? This is not the time to be calling those people. They will not look kindly upon this. So number one, not as many fishes as I thought I was going to see. There were some, and that's been widely reported. But criminals knew this is not the optimum time to target because, hey, these systems are already down. So there was a lot of media about phishing. And I was like, you know what? This is actually bad timing. But set that aside. Also, CrowdStrike marketing team. Guys, like, I get that you wanted to show some love, but sending an email with a QR code when everyone is just talking about CrowdStrike phishing emails.
Oh my God.
Super bad idea. So that was kind of, and also, man, I get it. Like, again, you wanted to show some love. You're trying to send some pizza or some coffee, but like, here's a $10 Uber Eats gift card for the multi-billion dollars in damages we just caused. Somebody should have done more testing on the marketing messages along the way.
Would have been at least an all-you-can-eat more steakhouse gift card if I was CrowdStrike.
Come on.
So those are my big lessons on this one. And I think I go back to this. We depend on technology like never before in our lives. And this is not a fluke. This is a repeatable pattern. We talked at the start of the episode. This has happened before. It will happen again. How bad it will be a measure of how we deal with these larger macroeconomic resiliency issues, which are as hard as climate change. So that is to say, I'm not optimistic. I have my cottage. I have my wood stove. I've got my generator, and I've never thought they were better investments than since Friday.
And on that note, we're going to wrap it up. That's our show for today. Thank you to the panel. Terry Cutler, head of Cyology Labs in Montreal. Thank you, Terry.
Thanks for having me.
David Shipley, head of Beauceron Security, beautiful downtown Fredericton. Thanks for coming in, David.
Thanks for having me.
And our special guest, Mike Walters, president and co-founder of Action One. Thank you, Mike. This has been great. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone.
Good luck, Mike.
Yep. And thank you for listening. If you're running a security company or another company that's concerned with making this type of news program focused on the realities, would you get in touch? We've had some companies step up, and it's greatly appreciated. Thanks to TD Bank, Soho Canada, and drumroll, Beauceron Security, who came to our aid when it mattered the most. Thank you, David. So if you want to sponsor a program like this, we need sponsors. Get in touch with me at editorial@technewsday.ca or catch me on LinkedIn. Step up there, fund the type of news we need. And if you're a customer, ask your vendors why they aren't supporting the news you need in cybersecurity. I'm Jim Love. Thanks for listening. I'll be in the chair for one more week, and Howard should be back after that. Have a great weekend.